I like to join something about my experience yesterday in the last session. Yeah.
Please, please.
And I like to ask something. When we had the last session yesterday, I did Guru Yoga by my own, and I invited Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal. And at first, instead of invite Guru Rinpoche, I invite Kim Rinpoche.
Aha.
And I know you ask us not to do that. Only if you ask us to do it once when we did that. And as the last time, it was a wow, wonderful power of energy. And then I realized what I have done, and I have finished it, and I do it again with Guru Rinpoche. And the point is only to join that, to join that I had this this powerful energy. And then I like to ask if you feel something when we did that, and if it is okay in the future to do that. That's my question.
That's an interesting way to begin the day, Christine. Oh, how am I going to get through this? Okay, I have to, this will turn into like an hour and a half lecture, okay? Or hour and a half rant, more like a rant actually. No. But this will take a moment to kind of explain the traditional / historic context and my experience of this, what you just, Christine, said, my students tuning into me nowadays, and then some additional comments. So, you know, I'm 42 and a half years old now, and I'm physically 42 and a half years old, but as a person who has purified the mind, I'm only 7 months old. Still a small baby, toddler, pulling down books from shelves. And Monica was sending me pictures of Ailu, Monica's and Carl's son today. So that's why I started thinking of toddlers. But it's actually kind of interesting. Well, in traditional Vajrayana Buddhism, you know, probably because, you know, Vajrayana Buddhism has been kept alive and has continued within Tibet for a long time. So, you know, Tantra and Buddhism died in India because of Muslim conquerors. So they killed and shooed out everybody who practiced Buddhism, because Buddhism is an atheist religion, not theist religion. So they didn't like that. So, you know, practitioners have to go underground, and many did that. Actually, many tantric Buddhists and Buddhists in India became Shaivites, Shaiva, like Shaiva tantrics, Shiva tantrics. So they kind of became Hindus, which is, you know, Muslims could accept that because, okay, now they have gods again. So, you know, it's known historically that a lot of Buddhist tantrics, they became Naths. Naths are called like tantric yogis and yoginis of Shaiva tradition, Naths. I myself, I also have a Nath name because one of my teachers, Sivakami, was part of the tradition. So I also have a Nath name. So that's what happened, around 1,000 years ago or so in India, and this pushed out some tantrics underground, some tantrics to, for example, to places like Tibet. Some tantrics went to China and from China, some tantric teachings were transported to Korea, Japan, maybe maybe even Mongolia at that time, but I'm not sure about that. But within the borders of Tibet, Tantric Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, Mantrayana Buddhism has been kept alive and kind of supported with all kinds of measures the most. So there it was kept, and probably because of the mentality of Tibetan people, they kind of made, I really should say Tibetan men, because it's always men who do this, myself included. So what happened in Tibet is that they created systems, steps. They created methods that had beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning part had several steps that needed to be done in certain way. All practices exactly like this in strict format. And then the same thing with the middle phase of practice, and same thing before the whole thing was done. So it was like a kind of like pharmacies are. Everything is really, really clearly, strictly laid out. It's not messy, or there's no room for improvisation, or there's not much room for creativity. So the opposite of that. And probably because of this, this is my impression. Again, I'm not historic or like an academic, and I haven't studied many topics and this topic in lots of historical detail, but my impression is that it is because of this why in Tibet they kind of, in a sense, formalized Guru Yoga practice, that Guru Yoga would be practiced only with the founder of the lineage. For example, Padmasambhava, for example, Milarepa, for example, Shakyamuni Buddha, and such like masters whose names everybody knew, masters who were known to the whole nation. So I think this is like a Tibetan influence. But then there are other takes on this. A little bit inside Tantric Buddhism of Tibet, there are definitely, Jesus also said this very clearly, that same applies to Hindu masters, Hindu Mahasiddhas, who have said that no problem, you can just turn to me for blessings. So they didn't say that, no, just keep practicing with Padmasambhava, keep practicing with somebody else than myself, the teacher who had become fully realized. They just said that, no problem, you can just, if you think that, if you prefer to practice Guru Yoga with me, yes, you can do that. So there are two completely different viewpoints on this. And like I said, I'm still a toddler, but in a sense, these 7 months, and it will continue also, I'm kind of learning new things or acclimatizing to this state where I don't experience conflicts anymore, like selfless state. And this is why, because I'm still kind of learning, meeting situations with a mind that I didn't have before, or mind that is without these conflicts. This is why I wanted to be kind of careful, because I remember when my teacher, the same teacher who I was referring to earlier, Siva Kami, I remember when she didn't finish her purification, but she was absolutely great teacher, and I loved her very much. Was one of the best Dharma friends, one of the two with Terayama Sensei I've had in this life. But she didn't, as a purely practical comment, she didn't finish her purification, and I remember that she told me that she had a lot of students in India, in southern India, because she was a teacher of Tirumala's Shaiva tradition, and that's why through her website there were a lot of Indians turning to her for guidance and practices. So, and Indians, of course, are very devotional. Like when they find something they can worship, they do it. So it's like they dive deep very quickly, which has good sides and bad sides. But I remember her telling me that, people were devotional to her in a way that was just over emotional, or if people were having some kind of health problems, they would fervently in their prayers pray to her, and she would get a headache, for example, and she couldn't sleep, right? So this is the reason why a couple of weeks ago, when we did the little Guru Yoga experiment over the weekend, when I told Sangha members that if you wanna give it a go, just practice Guru Yoga with me and see how it goes, see how it feels, and then give me comments, how it felt. And it was experiment also to me, because I wanted to find out if I would feel anything, or if there would be some unwanted side effects, myself, feeling your thoughts or feeling your emotional whatever turbulence you might have, or get headaches or something. But I didn't feel anything, so that was great. And so it was completely without negative side effects to me, and I think that it was also a very interesting and pleasant and positive experience for Sangha members, for my students. So interesting that you brought this up, Christine. Now, so far I haven't had any problems with, like you say, that yesterday evening during the last session you accidentally just happened to ask a blessing from Kim Rinpoche and it came. So I didn't feel a thing about that. And just like I didn't a couple of weeks ago, and I guess I should just draw the conclusion that it's fine to do if you want to do. Yeah.
Really, really a long answer. Thank you.
Well, fortunately, it didn't take hour and a half. But I know that I could add a couple of things to that. How many Mahasiddhas I've met physically? Well, Tangen Roshi in Japan is one, who I met very briefly when staying in his temple in 2005. And I think him and Ammachi, the hugging saint Amma, are the only ones I've met physically. I can't think of others now. there are other living Mahasiddhas, but though I think those two are the only ones who I met physically. But so I've met Amma many times. I just made a little post about her in my blog, and I've written about her in my blog before, and I've talked about Amma a lot because she has been. I never really clicked with her as a follower or as a student, although I have received her mantra and have spent a lot of time in her events, have lived for a short time in her ashram in India, and she has given me a spiritual name and all that. But at the same time, I was studying with Terayama Sensei, I was studying with Sivakami, I was studying with my non-physical masters, a big long list of Mahasiddhas non-physically. So my acquaintance and my association with her is, you could say, like an additional study of what Mahasiddhahood means, what Bhumis mean. But she has been a wonderful, and I'm really, really thankful to her for being who she is and doing what she does, because it is really exceptional. I'm talking about my own personal experiences. There are millions who have received all kinds of benefits and blessings and teachings through her, but from her. But from my personal perspective, she has been kind of irreplaceable. She has had an irreplaceable position in my yogic journey because she, just being so available, she has been a wonderful way to test myself, test my understanding of Tantra, test my understanding of all these bhumis and stages and awakening experiences, openings, perfections, all of that I've kind of tested on her presence. So Amma is one who, well, perhaps I should say first that I met her first time in 2003 and have been meeting her ever since, like regularly, almost every year. And I remember that back in 2003, I had my first awakening experience in 2011, soon 10 years ago. But back in 2003, I was just a kid, basically. I was 24 years old, just started meditating. I had been going to meditation events every now and then for years and did a little bit of silent sitting when I was a small kid in martial arts. But like systematical practice, I started at 24. And during that first year of practice, I also met her the first time. And for a long time, for several years, up until 2011, when I had my first awakening experience, going to her presence was like, it was just like completely different world, completely different realm, completely different mind, completely different energy. So it was like, if we think of steps or thresholds, I was here and suddenly, poof, I was much higher, complete change. And when I wasn't in her presence anymore, I was back far away. There was like this big difference. And I was scratching my head. What is that gap? Why is that gap there? What is that? What does it mean? And of course, over the years, it started to make sense when I had my first and second and third and fourth and so on awakening experiences, and my mind kept purifying. And throughout those years, that gap became smaller, 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 smaller. And last time when I met her was in December of 2019, so a little less than 2 years ago, and then the gap was this big. It was there, but it was almost gone entirely. And understand again that I've spent literally probably a couple of thousand hours in her physical presence, sitting there like 1 meter from her on the stage, sitting a couple of meters from her on the stage, sitting there in the audience, sitting in like stadiums, being hugged by her, I don't know, maybe 100 times, asking questions from her through translators. So I've had a lot of contact with her, a lot of time to really weigh my understanding, gauge my understanding. And so in December 2019, this gap, because I had all those Bhumi openings, all those Bhumi perfections, in December 2019 I was in the process of perfecting my 10th Bhumi. So from 1st to 9th it was all perfected, and I was working on the last one. And so I had done the whole journey of from 2003 until 2019 of 16 years. And how to say, reached the gap, made the gap smaller, and finally it was this close. And now there's no gap anymore. So, and she allows, like she gives her own mantras for people to do Guru Yoga all the time. I understand that I still have to think about, James is recording this file, and I have to think about after this talk whether it's good to put this up or not in YouTube. But in case if this goes to YouTube, I understand that there might be people who are listening to this and saying that it feels very uncomfortable that somebody is speaking of himself as a realized Mahasiddha, and he's a Westerner, and he's a white guy, and he's not Indian, and he doesn't look exotic, and this is very suspicious. Okay? And well, that isn't a new doubt towards myself or what I teach at all. I've heard that for as long as I've been teaching, but at the same time, us Westerners, we really have to get over that doubt that us Westerners couldn't attain full enlightenment. Because if it tells about something, is that we have doubt whether or not I have Buddha nature that can be realized or not, isn't it? So again, I have never asked my students to believe anything blindly. I have always encouraged practice and having experiences through practices, and like that finding for oneself. This is absolutely essential. But so I'm, like I said, I'm fine if any one of you, if my students want to practice Guru Yoga with me, even though I'm just a white guy, almost middle-aged white guy from Finland, it's perfectly fine with me now. I would have said before, my 10th Bhumi perfected, I would have said no. But now I have little experiences. We did the experiment, and you said you did it yesterday, and so on, that I can say that fine, yeah, go ahead. If I start getting headaches, or if I start getting, kidney problems out of a sudden because one of you prays for me to take your kidney problems, then I will maybe say that I'm just kidding. But it's kind of an interesting thing now that I think about it, that doubt that Westerners have, maybe some of it is jealousy, envy. Some of it is probably doubt, or kind of, not having thought it through properly, not having really understood that I have a Buddha nature and it can be completely realized, completely embodied. The delusion, suffering, confusion can be completely, fully eradicated and removed from my body-mind system. It is obvious that this kind of doubt is there in Western people because people still keep thinking that a Tibetan Lama or Japanese sensei or Indian Acharya or Chinese whatever or Mongolian whatever or Sri Lankan monk or Thai monk is better than a Western teacher. And I've heard like a couple of Western teachers say this, that even if a Western teacher teaches twice the better, in better language, clearer instructions is available, still that teacher is not as held as in as high regard as an Oriental Asian one. And when saying this, I'm not saying that you should come to me and touch my feet and, in Finnish we have the word pokkuroida. I'm not telling you to do any of that. I'm just making the point that when we are practicing Mahayana and Vajrayana practice, the goal is always to become a fully realized person who has removed all these self-based files from the system. So I just lost a track of my thought. Yeah, so I don't remember where I was going, but maybe it just was to make the point that people still seem to have that doubt about the, yes, that's what I was going to say, about the, how do you say that? People are in doubt about the whole meaning and motivation of practice. But interestingly, think about this. Among Tibetans, there has been Tibetan Mahasiddhas for about 1,000 years. Among Indians, there has been Indian Mahasiddhas for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Among Chinese, there has been Taoist Chinese Mahasiddhas for I don't know how long, 20,000 years. Among Japanese, there has been Japanese people who are fully realized. So there must have been some point when the locals had to kind of make that discovery that, in Japan there are many different schools of Japanese Buddhism, and one of those is Shingon school, which is tantric school of Japanese Buddhism that was imported by this monk named Kukai. Kukai means ocean of emptiness, his dharma name. So Kukai imported a form of Vajrayana Buddhism. He traveled to China to look for a teacher, and then he met, what was his name? Maybe Hui Gyo was his name. I'm not completely sure about that. But he met a teacher in southern China who was Indian. This happened in 7th century, I think. So like 1300, 1400 years ago. So there was an Indian Vajrayana master who gave the teachings to Kukai, who was Japanese, and then he traveled back to Japan and started teaching, and was able to establish Shingon Buddhism in Japan. But I have no doubt that Kukai was a Mahasiddha, because I've meditated his presence too. He's one in the Mahasiddha family. And so I just thought of Kukai as an example, that him being a Japanese person, having attained Mahasiddhahood, there must have been some point when Japanese people had to accept that, okay, our teacher who is of the same nationality as we are, this fellow is has finished his practice. So I don't think Kukai's students went to China or to India to had the need to invite teachers from other countries, because they got it all from Kukai, from their teacher. Maybe I would like to finish, if this goes to YouTube, it's necessary to also for me to hammer on the point that there has been many wonderful teachers in the Buddhist tradition, and especially Vajrayana tradition. There is people like Tulku Urgeyn. Recently, he passed away in 1996. There was Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who passed in 1990. And I mentioned those two. There have been many other Mahasiddhas who have lived recently and who have been really well known, really popular in Tibetan Buddhism. So the reason why I mention those names is that over the last couple of years, few times I read Tulku Urgeyn's message from his own book. This can be found from Open Heart blog. I've copied that text to the blog. And he says in that book, I think the name of that blog text is A Message to People World Over. If one of you can check it now, you can post a link on the chat window so people can get it. So Tulku Urgeyn makes it clear that he says this in the introduction of the book. Introduction, the first page, he says that full enlightenment, Buddhahood, is not something that happened in the past to just few people. That he says that he has met many men and women who have actually realized and attained Buddhahood. And he says that if they have, so can you. He says that on the first page of the book. Same thing with some Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's writings that, say that very, very important point as the first thing. So, to make it clear what we are doing. It is the nature of samsaric mind to kind of try to wiggle out of, avoid samsaric emotions and internal conflicts. Well, they don't feel nice. So when you feel scared, you have a panic attack or whatever, of course it doesn't feel good. So you just wanna get rid of it somehow. So you wiggle with it. It's very difficult to accept. But Interestingly, it's exactly the same habit pattern when it comes to this exact point. That, it has been said over and over and over again that full enlightenment, purifying the whole body mind, is possible and doable. So I'm not saying that this is not much of a problem in our Sangha, but like I was saying that, if somebody listens to this from YouTube, you can go back to and read that Tulku Urgeyn's message to people world over and really think about it. Because the nonsense has to stop culturally. People need to stop being like children who don't listen. We really need to mature and grow up. And it is simply a sign of a good practitioner. It's a sign of open-mindedness of a good practitioner if people really think about and contemplate what masters like Tulku Urgeyn have said and what I'm saying. I'm definitely putting myself to the spot. I make myself an easy target by saying this publicly. But the nonsense has to stop at some point. We gotta stop putting external things to pedestals. We gotta stop wiggling, our samsaric wiggling, and accept our suffering and accept the teaching of Dharma. If you don't believe my teaching of Dharma, then don't. But do believe Tulku Urgeyn's or Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's. Do believe Padmasambhava's, Yeshe Tsogyal's, Machik Labdron's, Milarepa's, Gampopa's. I could continue the list all day. I was making a joke that I would rant in this talk, but apparently I couldn't avoid ranting. But this is a really, really important, it's a crucial point. There are some people in the world of Tantric Dharma now, like academic scholars, thinkers, philosophers, and Buddhist teachers in the West, in Europe and States, that to some degree have started to figure this out. They have started to figure out that Buddhism is not about dogma. It's not about becoming Tibetan or Japanese or Asian. It's not about, identifying with cultures of different people. It's not about dressing as Tibetan or Japanese. It's not about talking in being able to read and talk in Japanese, Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit. It's not about that. It's not about any of the externals. It's not about the paraphernalia. It's not about big temples made of gold and fancy colors, and it's not about organizations. It's not about rules of organizations. Buddha Dharma or Buddhism is only, first and foremost, about realization of the nature of mind. Isn't that wonderful? That core, essential message of all Dharma masters, the message of all those Buddhist masters whose names I just said, the core message of Jesus, the core message of Lao Tzu from China, core message of all Hindu Mahasiddhas. Everybody all these masters keep talking about that we can attain, we can realize. And people keep goddamn wiggling. They keep changing it to something else. So even though I'm putting myself to the spot and making myself an easy target by saying all these things, at the same time, I couldn't be more proud about the results that we are seeing in our Sangha. We have now, well, Helena is still on probation time, but we have 3 students who are fully realized Buddhas, who have finished their purification process, and there is nothing to purify anymore. 3 students. I think that there will be 3 more by the end of the year. This is simply a matter of taking that inspirational message that we all have Buddhahood seriously and practicing, having experiences, openings, perfections, and taking it to the finish line. I'm extremely proud and to be able to say that we have such perfectly realized, not highly realized, perfectly realized yogis and yoginis in our Sangha. But I'm also very proud, for this not to sound cultish, I'm also very proud that Mahamudra and Chokchen teacher from the Tibetan tradition, Dr. Daniel Brown, has publicly stated in his talks that he has 2 such students. I'm incredibly impressed and proud that he says that, having the, respected status that he has in the tradition, so that he says it aloud, and that they actually have people who are perfectly realized, who are not anymore in the process of becoming, who are out of the process. So that's where we are now in this moment in history. In 2021, Dharma, yoga, meditation teaching started to come from Asia to the West less than 100 years ago. Less than 100 years ago. I was thinking about this, that if you think 60 or 70 years back, only 60 or 70 years old. Some people here are older than that. There was not a single yoga or meditation studio or group in the whole country. That was definitely the case in Finland. No, not a single group where people meditated, apart from like Christian services and such. But no Buddhist, no Hindu, no knowledge, no non-dualist, no knowledge of non-dual or emptiness teachings that liberates. So think about it. Only 60 or 70 years ago, that's a really short time. So we are like in the very early stage of pioneer work, when the Dharma has brought from Asia to West, and now we have I know people whose grandparents have started with Ram Dass and American first generation Americans who went to India and then came back and wrote a book and became very popular, like Ram Dass. I know people who are, started practicing with. I know grandchildren of people who started practicing with Ram Dass and the first generation influences and teachers. So the point that I'm trying to make is that, myself, I'm kind of a third generation practitioner. My parents didn't practice, and not my grandparents either. But looking at the my age, and comparing it with people who started practicing in the late 60s or mid 60s, early 70s, I would be kind of a third generation practitioner. But that's still very early. So 60, 70 years, 80 if you really push it, if you count there has been like I think Buddhist society in London and New York and places like that for maybe 100 years, but these are like really small groups, just one or two here and there. So I'm talking about yoga and meditation, Dharma becoming mainstream, and it's very good that it has become mainstream, and all of what is happening with secular mindfulness and whatnot, but still this is very early stages. So much more will happen, more people will become practitioners. Needless to say, Japanese Buddhism eventually stops feeling and looking like it's Japanese in the West. Same will have to happen with Tibetan Buddhism. And this has happened in history when it takes like 200-300 years for Dharma teaching to start look like the local culture. So 200-300 years, it's compared to that 60 years, it's a long stretch. But this has happened in history. That's how Buddhism started to look like Tibetan Buddhism. Buddhism started to look like Japanese Buddhism, and so on. And this is, of course, in Pemako, there is as little as possible Asian elements. But we have some, but as little as possible. And that's why I think that Pemaka is the first truly Western form of Vajrayana Buddhism. It has actually been helpful for me that I was not a formal student in any Tibetan lineage or any other lineage, except the Zen, but talking about tantric lineages. So it has been good to me and Pemako, because if I had been, let's say, a Nyingma practitioner, Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, then it would have been probably difficult for me to do what I've done, because I'm doing things so differently than in Tibetan Buddhism. So I think there would have been more people from the Tibetan tradition saying that saying various things. So anyway, so we have had teachings in the West for 60-70 years, and already now we have 3 Buddhas, 4 in total in our Sangha. In our Sangha of 82 people. I'm just stating a fact. I think it's very wonderful, but I also think that it is exactly how it should be. Because when I started practicing, when I was a young practitioner, I listened to what the ancient Chinese Zen masters said, who said that, Buddhahood needs to be realized. I listened. I didn't wiggle. Same thing with Tulku Urgeyn's message. Well, by the time when I read it, it was like, duh. But it was wonderful to see someone as influential as him from Tibetan tradition to say that so clearly. Don't fuck around. Don't play around. This is the most important point of all Dharma. So, I need to say a little prayer that this message of all the Mahasiddhas of all times, of Tulku Urgeyn, of Dilgo Rinpoche, of myself, that it spreads around the world and that there are people who listen. The world is in such a turmoil, like the chaos among humanity and the harmful effects that humanity has on planet Earth, all life on planet Earth. It looks like it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And to me personally, when I started to practice, I had seen so much the harm that the delusional self can do in my life, in my family, in my relatives, since I was a toddler. That to me, when I finally connected with Dharma practice, I just immediately realized that this is the only real way to establish world peace. The only way to establish real peace in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, in our societies, in the world society, is to remove the baggage, is to remove the delusion, is to remove the confusion of who we are. I am not sure, I am doubtful, to be honest, that humanity will ever get there to establish world peace. But I'm alive, I am here. You are alive, you are here. And we have the teachings. So we might as well have a go. We might as well try. Because we feel our own pain and we feel the pain and suffering of others. So to me it was never an option, knowing that it's possible to do that, to try that. It was never an option just to go back sitting in the couch and smoke and drink and lead my life like I had done up to that point. I have no problem of smoking and drinking, but my point is that there was no way I saw that there was the solution, and there was no way of disregarding that solution. So I've been taking that solution very seriously ever since. Maybe I should also add, before wrapping this up and taking a break, I could also add that if, again, there is somebody in YouTube who has made it this far in this talk, I doubt that most have dropped a long time ago, but if there is somebody who has made it this far, not knowing anything about Pemako and kind of shocked what this white dude is saying, in Pemako Buddhist Sangha, we practice the so-called pragmatic Dharma. We have no taboos. No taboos. Talking about experiences, talking about stage attainments, talking about awakening experiences, enlightenment experiences, is not only allowed, but it is encouraged. So in that point alone, we do things very differently than in the vast majority of other traditions. And that's actually, well, like I have recently posted in Facebook, apparently early on in Tibetan Dzogchen tradition, this was likely the time when Dzogchen teachings or Ati-yoga teachings hadn't yet merged with the monastic system, and it hadn't yet merged with tantric teachings either, like practice of deities and mantras. So I think it is the case that in the beginning Dzogchen was a system, a tradition of its own, that then was merged into monastic training and tantric training and so on. But earlier this year I read Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche's book. Somebody can find that link also to the chat window. The blog post is entitled something like Claims of Enlightenment of Ancient Dzogchen Masters. So based on Namkhai Norbu's book, I forget the title of the book, but in the beginning of that book it gives accounts of Dzogchen students and Dzogchen masters from around 2000 years ago or 1500 years ago, where they state that I have to see the quote from my Facebook because it's in my profile page now. Just a moment. Yes, so Louis Gyalpo, one of the early students who became a master, says in Norbu's book, "Thus has the state of knowledge of the Buddhas arisen in me." It's like saying that I have realized the same thing as the Buddhas. And there are like a dozen other short accounts. That was just one sentence of Louis Gyalpo's account, but there's like a dozen other accounts of famous early names of Tibetan Dzogchen who say that I studied, I practiced, and I realized exactly the same as Mahasiddhas of the past, as all Buddhas in 6 realms, that my mind is the same as Kuntuzangpo's or Vajradhara's, that there is no difference between my mind and that of Kuntuzangpo. I can only draw the conclusion that right in the beginning of Dzogchen, they were practicing what we know as pragmatic dharma, stating aloud that what they have or haven't realized. Isn't that interesting? And that is the exact opposite of how most people in most traditions do nowadays. In my view, the only reason why to talk openly about awakenings, enlightenment, is because it is very helpful for others. And for those who have open ears, those who listen, it is meant as an encouragement and inspiration to do the same. So, I don't know. Well, it's a wiggling, isn't it? I almost said that I don't know what happened since they started doing it like that back in the day when Dzogchen was still new among humanity. But it started people wiggled with it, and then they ended up doing the exact opposite. And nowadays, if you try to have I've been part of traditional Buddhist sanghas, a couple of sanghas, and if you try to have an open conversation about Kensho, awakening experiences, realization, enlightenment, people will kind of, be shocked or startled or, have really weird reactions. Even if you ask, or they chuckle like, ha ha ha, of course, but we don't talk about that. What a bunch of bullshit. I've seen the reactions so many times that I just think, I can't help thinking that, what are these people doing? It's nonsense. Like if I compare any field or form of secular education, from reading to writing to mathematics to physics to biology to electricity, training, engineering, it's all laid out, explained, thoroughly explained in details. Everything about it. And that's how it started in Dzogchen. But then at some point it became the total opposite. Imagine if that happened in engineering, that they kept something important, some basics of electrical engineering as a secret or a taboo. You couldn't talk about it. It sounds completely ridiculous, isn't it? Or, I was trained as a musician and a music producer. So if they left some of the notes unused, like in piano you have 12 notes in octave, so don't play that one note. We don't talk about it. Sounds completely ridiculous. And it is ridiculous what is happening in the world of Dharma. It needs to stop. People need to get rid of that whatever fear and doubt and belief, negative belief they have. They need to stop wiggling, and they need to update their methodology to the level of secular education. Imagine if everybody did that in Dharma. Imagine if the first meditation group you ever went to, the first or second time you were there, you could ask about awakening experiences and you would get a sensible reply instead of bothered chuckles. Imagine if the Dharma culture was like that. You could go to Dharma teachers, guides, Dharma masters, and have a sensible discussion. Get sensible replies, sensible answers that would make your own doubts disappear. Just like if you go to a good doctor, if you go to a good engineer, if you go to a good dentist, if you go to good soostress, they are professionals, so they give you answer. Imagine if that's the case. And this is what we try to do in Pemako. Of course, I've been at it, and we've been at it together for years and years and years and years and years. 13 years now. But at this point, this year, 2021, we have come to our Sangha members have started arriving at the end stop. We are not in the process anymore. We are already there at the end stop. There are Buddhas, there are Mahasiddhas, there are fully enlightened people in our Sangha. And there will be more. The number of such people will increase. This has nothing to do with mysticism. This has nothing to do with weird stuff. We still have, we don't have secret meetings. We don't have secret groups. There are no secret teachings. We still have safeguarding policy in place in our Sangha. We still practice ethics and morals. We are still doing the same thing as we've always done. But it's just that this year we have a harvesting year. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. The only thing I'm pissed off about is that I'm looking at a screen. I hope I would be looking at each one of you in person, eye to eye. And we could be together and share energy in the old-fashioned way. Like human beings should. Oh, how long was that? Hour and 10 minutes. So I have to do another 20 to make it hour and a half. Not really. Thank you for listening, everybody. And thank you so much for listening what I've been saying for years. Thank you for listening when I have quoted Tulku Urgeyn. Thank you for hearing Tulku Urgeyn's message, even if it came from my lips, from my mouth. Thank you for having common sense. I can't thank enough, honestly, for that. All right, let's take a break for 15 minutes and be back here at 25 past. Then we start dancing. Okay.